Hello everyone! Today I'm going to be doing an overview of preservation going into 11.1. We're going to look at what has changed, what remains the same, and what is most likely to be our strongest playstyles for starting the season. While I am going to talk about both raids and Mythic Plus here, I don't want to focus on the high-end Warface keys levels of Mythic Plus. Instead, I want to think more of the early weeks of a new season, where the goal for most people is to get to plus 10 or plus 12 keys and spam them as painlessly as possible to gear up quickly, and not necessarily pushing higher. So, no predictions about the Mythic Plus meta here, just talking about what we're gonna do starting the season. First, Chronowarden. Chronowarden is an easy point to start because it really received very little changes. If you're familiar with current Chronowarden and like it, you could pretty much just keep doing the same things you're doing right now and it will play out the same. It's still a very strong burst healer that in raids requires you to play very well into specific timings and properly set up your ramps. And in Mythic Plus has all the tools you will need to handle dungeons without being necessarily the absolute best at it. The main drawback of Chrono is that it is punishing if you mess up, and requires you to always know what's going on. That remains unchanged from live. The one thing that is changing is the fact that the Spirit Blooms you lifeline are no longer buffed by our old tier set, so they are a bit weaker. In exchange, your Echoed Burden Embraces now apply insurance, so you are trading some power from the Spirit Bloom cast into the Burden Embrace cast. Exact numbers aside, the playstyle remains the same, and you still aim for frequent lifeline ramps to handle damage. You are gaining a shorter cooldown on Burden Embrace from the new tier set, but you lack good options to feed into the lifelines besides the Spirit Bloom, so that change is not super relevant in raid, but it does allow you to Burden Embrace much more often in keys, which is pretty good. All in all, Chronowarden press is still very strong, very flexible, and very challenging to play to its maximum potential. Now for the actual big changes, Flameshaper had a decent rework going into Season 2 that changed a lot of how you wanna play into it. First of all, it has gained a lot of haste scaling. Engulf itself has its cooldown reduced by haste now, and every cast of Engulf in turn reduces the cooldowns of Dream Breath and Fire Breath, which means more haste leads to more Engulf, more Consume Flames, and more Dream Breaths. Haste already increases the healing of Dream Breath and in turn the healing of Consume Flame. But now you not only get more powerful healing, but also get it way more often, so the value of haste shoots up a decent bit. It's still probably behind Mastery, and you still want to sim all your gear on questionably epic live, but you shouldn't be surprised if you end up with a mix of Mastery and haste instead of something else. This also has a bad side to it though. Right now on live, the cooldowns of Dream Breath and Engulf are exactly 30 seconds, while Stasis is a minute and a half. So they line up perfectly and you had a very clear way to spend those cooldowns. Now, with the cooldowns varying widely depending on your stats and what buttons you press, you have to work a lot more to make this line up properly so you can execute your burst. So instead of you just knowing that you always get 3 engulf for each stasis, now you need to check how much time is left before you are supposed to use stasis, and according to that and what the engulf cooldown is depending on your haste, decide if you are free to spend more charges or have to hold them for stasis. This results in either you mathing out a perfect amount of haste and engulf cast for each boss fight beforehand, or having to do some level of mental math on the flight to decide if you are free to send engulf or not if you didn't do that prep. On top of all of this, Dream Breath does get weaker by the loss of a current tier set, but this is offset a good amount by the buff to expanded lungs from 20 to 30% and the new talent Fulminating Roar, which makes Dream Breath heal 20% faster. Healing 20% faster doesn't actually lead to more healing directly because the heal over time simply runs out faster, but if Dream Breath does more healing in the same window of time, then that increases the healing of Consume Flame. So the talents in the hero tree kinda pick up from the Consume healing loss from the tier set, especially so when you factor in that you're gonna use Engulf much more often. But this also means that you have a way shorter window to cast these Engulfs. Your rank 1 Dream Breath now only lasts for 12.8 seconds, and each engulf reduces it by 2 more seconds instead of extending it by 4 like it does on live. This means that sending a Dream Breath followed by 2 engulf will have the heal over time going away 9 seconds after you cast it. On the flip side, Dream Breath now always applies to yourself, so if you store one in stasis, you can count on that one to proc your Consume Flames when you release it. But it is very likely that if you cast your Dream Breath a tiny bit ahead of time, it won't actually last long enough for you to use the engulfs. All of this combined results in a much more fast-paced Flameshaper, where you are constantly rapid firing Dream Breaths and engulfs very often and doing more healing with them, but also have to think about what you're gonna do much more deeply and map out your engulf cast very well to not miss out on them, but also have them out for your stasis. Overall, this feels very good to play, but it's also a decent bit harder than what current Flameshaper feels. On the Mythic Blue side, Flameshaper still isn't amazing, but now at least there's some excuses for playing it. Life Cinders is a great external, and Engulfs gives you more Dreambreaths and Firebreaths, so you have better coverage and better DPS. This is still a decent bit worse than Chronowarden because you're losing Chronoflame and Afterimage, and it's a bit worse defensively for yourself because you're missing Warp. But it should be perfectly fine to do keys where the healer DPS isn't relevant, and you prefer to rely on Dreambreath to do your healing as opposed to more Spirit Bloom. To close up on hero talents, if you enjoy Chronowarden, then you will keep enjoying it the same way you have done so far. If you like Flameshaper, oh boy, are you gonna have to adapt. Both hero talents feel very connected to Preservation, but in their own unique way, exploiting different parts of the spec. It is definitely very strong, but fiddling for press, it feels very easy to mess up. And then, for one decently big change that is outside of the hero talents, Emerald Blossom now doesn't consume echoes. To clarify, this does nothing for Blossom builds. They are still bad, and this doesn't really affect them at all. This is a change that lets you cast Blossoms on echo builds when you think you can get value out of them without having to do the extra mental work of making sure you take care of your echoes. Right now, Emerald Blossom itself is not necessarily a bad button, it just has too many drawbacks. It requires 5 damage targets in close proximity to each other, while you have an Essence Burst available, and also there are no echoes active on the group and there won't be any echoes for the next couple of seconds. If you find yourself in this very specific situation, Blossoms is actually a correct button to press. For the cost of a single Essence Burst, the healing it will do instantly is way more valuable than when a single echo could get you. The problem was that all of these other conditions meant it's very challenging to actually find a situation where it is worth to use it. Now, with this change, you can forget about the echo parts. As long as you have 5 damage targets and an Essence Burst, Emerald Blossom can be a very valid choice to deal with that situation. You definitely want to use an Essence Burst because the high mana cost of using Blossom with Natural Essence makes it way worse, but when it's free because of the burst, it is very potent. This opens up the talent tree and means you can mix in some Emerald Blossom talents if you're casting some of them consistently during the fight. Ouroboros plays perfectly into this, as your normal echo gameplay will buff the eventual Emerald Blossoms you will send when these scenarios present themselves. While things like Cycle of Life present interesting options as you are now able to generate cycles and proceed to fit a big ramp into them because the blossom that spawns the cycle doesn't consume your echoes. There's a lot of options here, and some people really hate the idea of casting blossoms, but the spell has a lot of potential, and use it well can be very rewarding. So you should expect guys to mention the option of mixing in blossoms every now and then. So, to summarize everything, Preservation is still very strong. Both hero talents still have their advantages and disadvantages that will depend on how the specific boss you're doing plays out. Ideally, you are able to play both on demand and swap between them for each boss. Chronowarden remains mostly unchanged, while Flameshaper is gonna need some relearning and adjustment. And you should expect to mix in some Emerald Blossom cast if you want to be extra efficient. I hope this recap of the spec going into next patch was useful to you. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments or join the Evoker Discord and ask me there. Guides for all the Season 2 content will be coming out on Spirit Bloom Pro as we go into the season, and that will be all for now. Bye bye!